Hello and welcome to the official reading of the third short story here on ThreeDayStories.com. Out of the 3 random subjects, I chose Life's Blood, which is a metalcore song by the band 18 Visions, and if you want to, you can listen to this song if you click right about here. If you want to see the drawing of the 3 random subjects for this cycle, then you can click about right about here. And if you want to read along to this story and aren't already on my blog, then just click right about... Oh, I never get this right. Here. Click here. So, this story is called Life's Blood. Have fun. The blood is life, and it shall be mine, it growled from Sarah's headphones. The gargling voice was barely understandable, and she had never been a big fan of metalcore. But listening to this song was the least she could do now. The words felt appropriate and soothing. Sarah increased the volume of her phone to the maximum as she walked around the corner of her street. The song ended with some hard and abrupt chords, and the singer forced out, "I envy you," a few times. She could relate to that. When she neared her parents' house, she saw a police car already in the driveway. She took out her earbuds, pulled her black robe's hood over her head, and made sure that her dyed hair covered just enough of her face to blur her eyes. When she entered the house, her parents and 2 officers were standing around the dining table. All eyes were on her all of a sudden, but no one said a word. So Sarah turned and scuffled towards her room. Of course, everyone started to follow her and started talking at the same time. Sarah just walked on into her room, took off her floppy backpack and threw it behind the bed. While the horde of old people behind her was barking on and on, she turned on her stereo. The rhythmic screeching of vintage punk guitars drowned out everything else in the room. Her father's face was getting redder and redder as they all tried to shout over each other and the music. Sarah just bent her knees and fell backwards onto her bed. The music suddenly stopped as one of the officers had pulled the stereo's plug out of its socket. "Do you even hear what we are trying to tell you?" her father shouted. Sarah rolled her eyes. Of course she knew. "You want to inform me that Paul's dead," she mumbled, without ever changing the tone of her voice. Everybody's mouth and tongue froze mid-sentence. Short looks of insecurity were exchanged. "And Mom is telling me how I'll probably get raped if I come home late again." Gasps of shock gave Sarah another moment of silence, which was over all too quickly though. While her father tried to burst the vein in his forehead by screaming at her, her mother tried to explain to the police officers how she was just worried about her precious daughter's safety after dark. Sarah just stared up to the ceiling and thought about the last words of the song she had heard before. Finally, one of the police officers raised his voice and shut up her parents. "We know this must be hard for you, Sarah, but we have to ask you some questions." Sarah exhaled and lowered her eyelids to an even more apathetical expression. "I'm sure you can imagine how devastated Paul's parents must be right now. They just want to know why their son did this to himself." Sarah raised her head and tilted it to the side in fake sympathy. "Oh, of course, because they cared so much about him, right?" The officer, not knowing if she was genuine or just a little asshole, turned to her parents. "Look," Sarah's mother chimed in, "we don't want to hear about how you hate everyone that isn't your age. We just want to find out what happened to your little friend." "Oh, this is how it works? You die and suddenly everyone cares about what's going on with you? I should remember that," Sarah exclaimed. "Did Paul have any trouble in school or at home?" one of the officers asked, trying to move the whole ordeal along. Sarah slowly turned her head away from the officer, crossed her arms in front of her chest and stared at the ceiling. Her eyes didn't move, nor did she blink for a good 15 seconds. Until suddenly her father pounded his fists on Sarah's closet door and made quick steps towards her. One of his hands came down right next to her head and his face got really close to her own as he leaned above her. "I don't care how dark or cool you think you are. When someone dies and a police officer asks you about it, you open your fucking mouth or else..." He was interrupted by an officer's hand on his shoulder and slowly got up again to take a slow breath and a step back. Sarah still laid there and didn't move a muscle, but her jaw was clenched so tight that she thought she'd felt a tooth crack. "So is there anything you can tell us about Paul?" Sarah shot up from the bed. What? If Paul had any trouble, I am sure the teachers at school would have done something. And his parents, of course. Those poor people. So you're saying there was something wrong in Paul's life? The officer tried to dig deeper. No, that's what I'm saying. I'm sure Paul would have told someone if he was... She overacted, weighing ideas in her hands. Let's say, constantly bullied at school? And I'm sure that the school would have done something about that. And I'm absolutely certain that his parents would have taken him seriously. His dad wouldn't have told him to man up and to not be such a sissy. Of course, everyone would have paid attention and would have done their best to help him. That is why everyone is so surprised now, right? She stood there, breathing heavily, shooting looks at the adults. One of the officers scribbled something on his notepad. Those are some serious allegations you are making there. Sarah scoffed at him and shook her head. Then, after a moment, she asked, Did he look peaceful when you found him? Was there a lot of blood? The officer looked up from his notepad. He seemed to have passed relatively quietly. But why would you think there was a lot of blood? Sarah avoided eye contact. Just a guess. I mean, how else would he do it? Not like he got a gun or anything. The officer mustered her for a moment while she was staring at the floor, tensely shifting her lower jaw around. Finally, he concluded, Well, we got what we came here for, and turned to his colleague and Sarah's parents. We'll show you out, her mother said, and led them towards the door. Before she left the room, she turned around to Sarah again. How could you be so cold and cynical when you hear that your best friend killed himself? She shook her head and closed the door behind her. Sarah started to tumble a bit where she was standing. Finally, she fell backwards onto her bed. Once the ceiling had stopped spinning, she reached into her pocket for her earbuds. Life's Blood, she played again. Paul had downloaded it for her just this morning. After she had listened to it for 2 or 3 more times, she slowly got up to sit on the edge of the bed. She reached for the backpack that she had thrown into the corner. Out of one of the little side pockets, she pulled a little white package. It was a plain white cardboard box. She opened it up. One of the razor blades inside was already missing. She felt the empty spot with the tips of her finger for a moment. Then she pulled out the one next to it. She threw the package into her bag and rolled up her sleeve. The song was still blurting into her ears. Sarah laid the blade onto her forearm, very gently. The singer repeated that one line over and over again, and Sarah repeated it in her head. I envy you. It was just a few drops of blood that she had to wipe away. It didn't feel as satisfying as she had hoped, but it was enough for now. So, this was the story Life's Blood here on ThreeDayStories.com. I hope you liked it, and I would love if you gave me some feedback, shoot me a tweet, join my Facebook page, like my channel, comment on YouTube, whatever you do, or of course comment on the blog. And yeah, look out for the next drawing of subjects tomorrow, and let's see what we get then. Goodbye.